Bella is a leading voice in the next generation of environmentalists. I wanted to talk to her about her vision of the future and what she thinks we need to be doing to stop climate change. I've read lots about you, and I think what you've done, it's been extraordinary. What lit your fire originally when you said, this is how I'm going to spend my time?
I watched a video about palm oil and the effect on orangutans, and I'd been obsessed with orangutans for a few years at that point, and my mum said it was because I looked like one because of my hair. The first thought that went through my head was, how can we be doing this to a species so alike to us? And then also, why are we continuing to produce palm oil in this way and to this extent when we know what's happening? And once you're on one issue, everything is attached to each other, and you can't pull out one issue without pulling out all the other issues. And I'm still learning about it. Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing as well, because I was wondering why you wanted me on as a 20-year-old, who's not an expert, but to sit in the expert's chair.
For me, it's about the ability to catalyse change. So I think what's the role of an entrepreneur, what's the role of Octopus as a business, is to catalyse change. That's exactly what you've done. You may not have set out with that intention, but you're influencing millions of people. You're trying to make the world a better place because that's your purpose and that's what you care about, and you're really lucky. Most people, they don't find it ever sometimes.
I think anyone who feels like they're lacking a purpose, this is our purpose as humanity. So if you feel purposeless, I've got something for you.
How have the actions changed in terms of what you do differently today versus 6-7 years ago?
So when I began, it was very what you would imagine from a stereotypical activist. I was out protesting, this placards, with a megaphone. And now what I do is I try and bring it a lot more into what I'm passionate about. I do a lot more writing, a lot more storytelling. And I think we shouldn't call making change and taking action activism anymore. It should just be necessary. And then the ones who aren't doing that are who we need to reach.
Okay, and so the change stance and now the importance of storytelling, what was the thinking behind that, and how's that driven change?
I worked on this documentary, and we spoke to lots of people who were on the front lines who had solutions. What many of them said was they began from hearing someone's story, and what motivated them was a vision of the future and a vision of something better than what we have today. So it was that journey which led me to the importance of storytelling.
So if you were the Prime Minister for a day or a week or however long it took, and you were able to stand up and say, this is what we're going to do differently, what would you say?
Firstly, I would implement much higher carbon taxes. I would provide schemes that would incentivise agroecology, such as vertical farming, such as precision fermentation. There are so many great innovative things taking place, which it's almost, I just don't understand why they're not being incentivised as much. I would also focus a lot on rewilding, because I think nature has been overlooked so much in the environmental sphere completely. Take advantage of, human psychology. When they implemented the 10p scheme on plastic bags, that reduced the demand by 90%.
And if you were running one of the big oil companies, so the oil companies are all over the papers at the moment.
Oh God, I hope I wouldn't be.
Well, that's a position from which you can make lots of change.
Yeah.
So if you're running one of the big oil companies, what would you do?
Leave.
If you're going to run it differently, because you have access to all this capital, all this resource, what would you be doing?
And we can't have a society where we're reliant on fossil fuels at all. Maybe if I was head of a fossil fuel company, I'm assuming I would be quite wealthy, probably use that money and invest it completely in renewables, because it is not only viable, but it's an obligation for us to have a country 100% dependent on renewables as soon as possible. It's not just about sacrifice, it's about moving towards a better future. And I think so many people are just so excited, and that's how we get people involved. It's not just castigating the system, it's saying, we've envisioned something better, we're going to show you what that is, and come with us, let's move towards this together.
And so it's about optimism, it's about believing there's a brighter way, it's about actually looking at it through a positive lens as opposed to it's broken.
I don't think it's about believing, I think there is a positive way, and you know this, you're creating the positive way.
Do you think we'll solve the problem?
There's no binary, we don't solve it, and this is why I don't like the IPCC report things which say we have 10 years left, because people otherwise could wait 9.5 years and then think, right, now let's start taking action. Instead, so I think we don't recognise how much it's affecting us right now, how much the environmental crisis is affecting us, and that's what we need to do. We need to say to people, no one is exempt, no one is going to be able to, fly off in their private jet away from the environmental crisis. We're all going to be affected, and that is going to be in the coming few years, not in decades' time.
Right, so are you more optimistic today than when you started 6-7 years ago? Or
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah, I think to sustain what I'm doing, and for anyone who recognises what needs to happen, you have to actually look towards a better future and think, this is going to get better, and whatever happens, I'm going to keep doing something about it, because, you know, I'm just happy I have something that I'm so passionate about and that I recognised the scale of the issue.
Bella's ability to articulate the biggest threat to society we're likely to face this century, while remaining calm and optimistic, is remarkable. She believes that for humanity to have a future on our planet, we need to find solutions to the big, obvious problems. At the top of this list is addressing our reliance on fossil fuels, and for good reason. Fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and natural gas, are the primary sources of carbon dioxide emissions, the main greenhouse gas responsible for global warming and climate change. And yet, 80% of the world's energy supply still comes from fossil fuels. So I wanted to drop in on Greg Jackson, the founder and the chief executive of Octopus Energy, to see how close he thinks we are to a carbon-free future.
In 2015, I had a conversation and I asked, do you know anybody who you think could run an energy business? Energy at the time was the second least trusted industry in the world behind financial services, and he introduced me to a guy called Greg Jackson. And Greg is, I don't say it lightly, but the single most talented entrepreneur I've ever worked with. Greg set up Octopus Energy with our backing and our funding in 2016 and has gone on to build an energy company that now serves 1 in every 5 households in the UK, and I think is doing more to accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy than anyone else. So I was speaking to Bella Lack, who is a climate campaigner, and she was talking about the world's need to move away from fossil fuels. So in your view, where are we in that journey?
I think we've got all of the technologies we need. What we don't have is the institutions. And so I think the next phase of the renewable revolution, really, which is deploying more and more of the wind farms, solar farms, electric cars, all the stuff that creates that fossil fuel-free future, to the point that we force the institutional change to embrace this. Doing that will not only mean that we have cleaner energy, but it'll get cheaper every year as well.
And what kind of scale is required there? If you think about capital, the amount of money that needs to go in to accelerate the world's transition, what are we talking about?
I mean, it is many trillions of dollars. But interesting, every time I speak to investors, huge global investors, the money's there. What's not there is the opportunity to deploy that money. So around the world, we're constrained by, for example, grids where there's a 10 or 15-year queue to build a project. We need to open this up now. We need the same pace of change that we saw with mobile networks when the iPhone launched.
And what's Octopus Energy's role in accelerating this transition? And where are you in that journey?
Yeah, so first of all, Octopus understands the extent to which consumers and businesses will benefit from the renewable transition. And we're building the technologies that enable them to see those benefits today with lower energy bills. For us, we've got to keep on building it and then bring governments and investors, other stakeholders in the energy system, even competitors to the table to see how this stuff works so that we can accelerate it.
Do you think there's a world where the energy meter is going to run backwards and you're actually going to get paid for energy you are creating as a household? Can you see a world where that exists?
I mean, it already exists. So if you've got an electric vehicle on your drive, it can soak up super cheap electricity when it's windy, when the grid's empty, when it's sunny, and then it can discharge that electricity into your house at times the grid's expensive. You don't need to think about it, it just works. I think the magic of this is that a typical electric car has enough power for a typical house for about a week in its battery. So, as we have millions of cars on our driveways, millions of electric cars, you've got a nationwide store of energy that's actually enough to get most houses through the best part of a week. And again, this isn't science fiction. We're doing it today. We just need to grow it.
So your initiative, I think you came up with a few years ago, which was the Octopus Fan Club, which is about communities wanting and engaging with renewable energy and seeing the benefits directly to them in terms of cost of energy bills. Just explain how that works and what the future is going to be for that.
Everything we talk about is that building renewable energy can bring the cost down. If we build a wind farm today, we can generate electricity for maybe 5 pence a kilowatt hour. And yet in a typical home, even before the energy crisis, electricity was costing maybe 17 pence a kilowatt hour. So something is going wrong in the system. And what we started doing is building a wind turbine near a town or a village. And then when it's windy, giving people electricity that more closely reflects that real cost. For example, we've got 3 turbines where people who live nearby get a 20% discount when the turbines are turning, and they get a 50% discount when it's particularly windy. And what that does is enables them to benefit from the fact that they've hosted, their communities are hosting cheap electric generation.
So from a practical standpoint, what's Octopus Energy doing differently to other energy companies in driving this transition?
Yeah, look, our view is that a renewable world is a cheaper world, but it requires entire system change. And where the system's not changing, we're doing it ourselves. For example, we've built a research facility and training centre in Slough. We're investing massively in creating new heat pump technology to drive the cost of heat pumps down. Heat pumps are 6 times more efficient than burning stuff. But the UK wasn't adopting them fast enough. So we literally built 2 houses in 17 days. We're training maybe 1,000 engineers a year to develop, test and innovate this stuff.
So if we continue on the path we're currently on and the world's reliance on fossil fuels, what happens? How do you think about that?
I mean, first of all, I don't think there's a debate anymore, right? Climate change is real. I think when it comes to energy, perhaps the most shocking thing is we have all of the solutions today. And the solutions are cheaper than the fossil fuel world. We just don't have the institutions and the incentives for businesses to drive that change. And so I think the most important thing we can do here is show people what the future can look like, and then absolutely work with governments and pressure politicians to bring this change about. It's not going to be that many decades before future generations will be truly unable to forgive us for not doing that.
Greg never fails to inspire me. He's not willing to sit on the sidelines and wait for the system to change. Instead, the team at Octopus Energy are forcing change by investing massively in the technology that has the potential to make it cheaper and easier for hundreds of millions of people to access green energy. With this in mind, I wanted to see how they're doing it with my own eyes.
So this is our Electrification of Heat Training and Research and Development Centre. It was built 2 years ago. Greg, our CEO, was looking at our impact on the world, and not many people know this, but heating is actually the biggest source of carbon emissions, even more than the cars we drive. So he wanted to do something about that and looked at all the technology available, and heat pumps were the obvious answer. We wanted our engineers to have experience in real homes and for people to see exactly what heat pumps look like. And we're developing new technology all the time. We have a whole team of engineers and scientists kind of working with third-party technology, but also our own as well, to basically bring down the cost and enable heat pumps to work in as many homes as possible.
Oh, I love it. It's just so cool. I mean, you don't know many other companies that say, do you know what, we really want to prove heat pumps. The best way to do it is buy a big building in Slough and then in 2.5 weeks build 2 homes and then train 1,000 people in a year in how to install them. That's pretty cool. So this is the room where everything seems to come together, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. This is a glimpse into the kind of future home. We've got some wind and solar over there. We've got some smart meters, EV charger, and this is actually quite a special one because it's a vehicle to grid charger. So it means you can charge in both directions. You can charge your car when you need it, but also you can put that back onto the grid when needed.
And the impact of that for the average homeowner, let's say the average homeowner is paying, let's say they're paying £2,500 a year for their energy use. What do you think the new world's going to look like?
Well, so as more green energy comes on the grid, which we know is cheaper, there's been lots of analysis to prove that now. The cost of energy should come down over time. The more we electrify things, our cars, our heating, the more we can take advantage of that cheap green electricity as well.
For me, I'm taking away all the ingredients are already there. So we need more capital going into this market, so more money being invested in renewable energy generation. We need the government to continue to be supportive in its legislation. And then we need companies like Octopus who are prepared to take a big risk and build a facility like this and train thousands of people and say, we're going to make this happen, and we're going to make it happen at scale, because it's getting to that scale that makes it work for a customer standpoint in terms of the cost.
Yeah, exactly. Very well summarised.
As Greg said, the debate on whether climate change exists is over. It's clearly very real, and our attention needs to focus on solutions, striving for a future that's not reliant on fossil fuels. I don't believe that the solutions to these problems will just come from governments. I think they'll come from storytellers like Bella, who can win the hearts and the minds of people across society, and entrepreneurs like Greg. People who are passionate and crazy enough to dream up a future that's different from the world we're living in today. Companies like Octopus Energy are proving to everyone that it can be done. The demand is there. The technology exists. The future will be different but better.